Caitlin, off to you.
All right, let me just get that notification out of there. All right, hello everyone. My name is Caitlin. You might know me as Caterbug or Mrs. Caterbug on different platforms. I am the artist for ArtSnacks Quarterly. If this is your first time joining one of the quarterly live streams, I'll just give a little bit about my background. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I live in Seattle, Washington. My schooling was in art education, computer graphics, and with art education, would take classes in every discipline. So I think that kind of like molded me into being a multidisciplinary artist, kind of fell in love with every part of it. And today we are going to be working on some abstract landscapes using mixed media techniques, specifically with like layering different kinds of paper. So what I'll do is I'll go over all of the supplies that I'm using, especially if you didn't happen to get the quarterly box. I'll kind of we will be using almost all the supplies that came in the quarterly box plus a few extra. So if you could switch to yep, there we go. Great. So these are the two examples that I have. This one I did using a photo reference as like my inspiration for. And this one I just did kind of like just going with the flow. I really wanted to do something with like the spacey background. And so I'm going to go over some of the other supplies that I'm using, but if you want to drop into chat which one of these you want me to start with, go ahead and say like sunset or outer space in chat, and I can start with either of these. We might be able to get through both, but yeah. So some of the other products that I'm going to be using are some uh, plain sketchbook paper. I just wanted some white paper. You can see that I just like tore this out of an old sketchbook. And then I'm also going to be using, if I do the space one, I'll be using some of this black mixed media paper. ArtSnacks featured this a while ago. It's a great mixed media paper, and it's fun to get black paper because it's just not what you would usually have around, but I've used it like so much. And then in the fall box, everyone got a Fabriano paper pad that's toned. And that came in, I can't remember exactly what all the colors. This one's, I was like, where's the name? Clay, and then there's sand, moss, and sea. And so I'll be using almost all of those colors, and I already have a few of them cut up here, and I'll just grab one out as needed. So feel free to, you don't have to use the Fabriano ones, but having some different colored paper would be helpful. Or you can just color an entire piece of paper using some of your media that you have with you. These are my photo references. So if you have some landscape photos that you're inspired by, I I just like have such an easier time when I have something to draw inspiration of. This is not photorealistic at all, but I still found it to be a lot easier, like looking at something and developing like a value scale from a photo reference. So I just prefer to have a photo reference for things. These are all pictures I took on a cross-country drive and have lots of different kind of like color palettes. I guess a lot of like blue and brown, obviously, because like earth colors, um, but it gave me a good idea of kind of like how to layer the make it look at least somewhat realistic so I get that landscaped effect. So I have some photo references. I have my set of pencils that came in the fall box. I'm not using these heavily today, but I did use them for some light sketching. I'll be using these General's Pastel Chalk colored pencils. These were not in the fall box, but they pair really well with the pan pastels to do like some really fine detail stuff. And then I'm also using the set of mechanical pencils, mechanical colored pencils from the fall box. Lots of different colors there. And like, we might do a little swatch party of these just because some of the colors don't show up exactly how they look on the cap. And so if you haven't explored with those, that might just be like a good opportunity to do that. I have my kneaded eraser, which is nearly purple at this point, because I've used it so much with the pan pastels. So this works great. I didn't end up using this a bunch when I made mine, but it would definitely be handy if you're looking to clean anything up. You'll want an adhesive. I have this Tombow one glue stick, and then I also have like a liquid glue. This is from Scotch, and it's like a scrapbooker's glue. And sometimes it's just easier to use that instead of a glue stick for me. And then I have the Pan Pastel set that came in the fall box with several different applicators. I have the small, like makeup brush style one, a very well-loved sponge. And then I have like 3 cleaner ones here too. And then the pencil sharpener for both my pastel colored pencils and my regular graphite pencils. And that is about it for supplies. And I see that I have some votes for outer space. So this one, which I'm really excited about. I love outer space. I try to include it in everything I do. And so I'm excited that you guys picked that. My husband said that this one looked like really 3D when he saw it, which I thought was cool because that was kind of the effect I was going for. And it's pretty simple. I'm not going to be using a lot of this is very like loose techniques. It can come together really quick depending on how much detail you want to put into it. So yeah, let's get started. I'm not if I'm going I was trying to decide if I wanted to pull out a photo reference, but I think I'll leave that in case we have time for a second one. But feel free if you're having trouble like figuring out where to start your line, or if you wanted to include a river or something, and I don't have like a river going through the mountain on this one, like definitely pull up a photo reference. So you can even just use Google Image just to look at like what does a river look like coming through the mountains? If you wanted to include a different part of the landscape into your piece. Okay, I'm just going to clear off some of this other paper out of the way. I will be using some of the black mixed media paper for the background, but I already have some cut up here. And then I'm just going to use this paper. So the size that this is 1 full sheet of the Fabriano paper, but it's cut in half, hamburger style. So that is the size of it if you are looking to get the same size. You're welcome to use a full sheet, but that might just take a little bit longer to cut out all of the different pieces. Oh, and that's one thing I forgot to mention. I also have a pair of scissors to cut stuff out. So let's get started here. The first thing I need to do is glue down this black background. And the only reason I'm not using a full sheet of this is because I love this paper so much that I didn't want, like the other half of it is the background for this. And I didn't want to put a whole piece of it down here if you're not even going to be able to see it on the bottom. So I'm using this tan paper as the background. Otherwise, if you want to use a full sheet of the black for your background, that's totally fine. Just explaining why I'm choosing to do it that way. And I'm going to use my glue stick to glue this down. All right. And I do really like these glue sticks. This came in the very first art journal snacks box. So I think Erin tries to include some type of adhesive in every box, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's really fun. They always have cool stuff going in those boxes. And if you didn't see the sneak peek for the art quarterly box, if you like to look at sneak peeks, has been posted in Mix and on like Instagram and stuff for the next quarterly box. But I won't mention what's in it in case anyone's trying to like avoid the sneak peek. I get it. I like being surprised too. So for this first layer is this tan layer in the background. So that's what I'm going to work on first. And I'm going to do that. Really, I'm just randomly kind of like cutting zigzags into the paper. It really doesn't have to be anything too exact. And if you mess up, you can always just kind of like cut it into different pieces. Like if you didn't like how this part looked, you could just cut that part off and then layer another piece on top of it. So I'm going to see how that looks up there. Might bring it down a little bit. I'm going to cut out, or might take this piece, put it right here. And some of this might end up getting covered up by the next section, and that's okay. I think more is better. Like if something ends up getting covered up, is okay. So like don't be afraid to put down too much because it might get covered up. So this is a more is more, not more is less kind of thing. So gonna see if I want to include maybe one more piece like right here. And I'm not exactly trying to replicate this exactly. It'll have the same sections of like tan, gray, green, blue, but I'm not gonna like follow it to a T. So let's see. I think that's looking good. And then I'm gonna take these pieces and treat them with some pan pastel before I glue them down. And this does get a little messy because you're gonna be probably getting it on your hands and stuff because you have to like touch the paper after you put the pastel on it. So just be aware of that. You can certainly probably be a little more precise and not have that happen. But another thing that would be helpful if you had, like I have that scrap paper from my sketchbook, just to use while you're putting the pan pastel down so that it doesn't get all over your workspace. Yeah, so let me see. I'm going to grab one of my cleaner sponges that only has yellow on it for this. And if this is your first live stream tuning in to when you've used the pan pastels, the idea is to think of it more like paint and less like eyeshadow. So you want to think about like kind of dipping your brush in, like you would dip your brush into a dollop of paint and not like an eyeshadow or like a powder where you want to like rub it around, because that's going to create a lot of dust and excess, and a little product goes a long way. So this is a less is more part for this one. And yeah, so if it's first time using that, that is what you want to do. And I'm just looking to create a little bit of dimension on these pieces. And I'm kind of thinking of like, I want the edges of this piece to be kind of dusted in the golden color. And so I'm just going to be working on, I'm like starting on the scrap paper and dragging it onto the toned paper. And later on, I use different like application kind of like techniques or textures on there. This one I would say is more of just like a smooth application. I'm not really trying to make it look rocky or anything. Since this is the one that's furthest in the background, it's visually going to have the least amount of detail, if you want to think about it that way. And you can still also treat it like it has a light source. So I'm going to go ahead and on this side of the mountain, make that just like a little bit more like brighter yellow, as if that is actually where maybe some more stars are shining later on. So and I'm just dipping that into the pan pastel and working, just like slowly building that, working it in. Okay. And then you can take your other piece and you can like kind of see how that's going to start looking. And then you'll want to do this technique to each piece. Sometimes I like to hold up the other pieces to see like if I needed to bring the color down anymore. Because sometimes the piece that you're putting over it might cover up all of the color you put on there. So that is looking good so far. Also, it like this scrap paper is going to end up looking really cool that like you can definitely maybe even for your second piece or second or third piece, you can like cut different parts out of your scrap paper to use in your landscape would be really cool too. Okay, and then I'm just going to do this side of the mountain. And I am going to make this edge a little bit more yellow since that is where I decided the light is coming from on this side. The things with more light are going to be more saturated. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to set that down and then I'm going to glue the first layer on to my background. You can really see that's starting to like really pop off of that black paper. Looks really nice. I'm going to see where I want to position this. I want to make sure I'm going to leave enough of the black paper. Like I could probably bring it down even more because even though this part's showing, that is where this next piece is going to go. But I think I'm going to just put it up high. Okay. And for this part, I'm going to use this liquid glue. And one of the reasons I'm picking the liquid glue to use at this part is because the pan pastel, it does not have much of a binder in it. So it's going to be able to transfer onto another paper or onto your hands. And so I don't want to face it down to rub with a glue stick because then it's going to transfer onto this. So instead I'm just flipping it over and just putting like a small amount of this liquid glue on the other side. And then you could probably use like a piece of paper to press this down if you don't want to get it on your hands. But I've already kind of just, I know I'm going to get messy, so not too concerned. Plus, I always say I feel more like an artist whenever I like my hands are covered with paint or whatever. So just embrace it. All right, I'm going to put this next piece right about, like, should I put it all the way up? That looks kind of nice. So I'm going to put it up right there. I really like how the yellow looks against the black there. Looks really nice. And have a real tall mountain right here. Let me even bring that up a little bit more. Okay. So that is our first landscape section completed. And kind of at the end, you can always go back and add more detail with like your colored pencils or any other media you decided to pull out into your workspace today. But as I'm building it, I'm just going to be leaving them a little bit more simplified and then going back in later with to like really boost up the value and stuff. So let's go into the mountain section. And I have a piece of the Fabriano paper in the gray color, which is called clay. I keep forgetting. I was like, which I want to call it stone, and that's not correct. So clay. Oh, I don't have to fold this in half because, or actually, I'm going to go ahead and fold it in half because I might use the other half anyway. So I'm just going to fold this in half and then cut down the center just so I already have a piece of gray that is this half sheet size that I'm working in. And then for this part, again, I'm not going to sketch out the mountains. You're more than welcome to use your graphite pencils to like sketch out the mountain shapes if that would be helpful for you. I'm just going to kind of just go in straight with my scissors and start cutting out mountain shapes. What I think you're going to be looking for is a variety of like how kind of like, I don't know, think of it like Christmas trees where like some are really like short and wide and other ones are going to be really tall and thin. So that's kind of the same idea you want with these mountain shapes. So you get a variety. And also mountains aren't like equal on each side. Like sometimes they have like a really gradual slope on one side and then it goes like straight up on the other side. So it doesn't have to be even. Really anything goes. And then like you see, like I can just use like my negative here as a whole piece, which I might do there. I might just taper this part off a little bit and do there. And what you want is just to get a bunch of them cut out, and then you might not use all of them. But then you can really like play around with the entire arrangement. So just cut out a bunch. And you can make ones that have like a double peak on them too, like that. Okay. I think that is enough to start with. It'll probably be enough. I won't have to cut out anymore, but you never know. Okay. And then I'm going to decide kind of which side I think is up for all of these, because that's going to determine how I'm coloring them before I put them on the sheet. So I'm like kind of just facing them in a way that seems like visually what seems right. So I'm just going to lay them all out and then we're going to do a similar process of using our pan pastels and then gluing them onto the sheet. So this time around, I'm going to be using the purple and have a very well-loved, these are called the soft, like art sponge, and they're by the same brand that makes the pan pastels. And so you can get like little packs of these soft brushes, and they have like a pretty like a big variety of different kinds of things like this. Like you can get ones that are like connected to like a palette knife kind of. I haven't used those, but they look really cool. So yeah, that is, in case you wanted to look up those, that's what they're called. And again, I'm just kind of tapping it into that purple. And what I'm thinking about here to make it look like these mountains is I want the like shadow, the darker side, to be on the bottom of the mountain. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on, is kind of coloring from the bottom up, very much the opposite of what we did with this yellow one where we colored from the top down. So you can start by just dragging the pan pastel over the bottom. But then to make this kind of have like a rockier texture, I just kind of like went and like tapped it over this and like moved my sponge tool around so that it created more of a rocky, uneven texture, more mountainy looking. You can certainly go with a very smooth texture for an even more stylized look of the mountain. And this is something where just guesstimate how much of the mountain you want to like put the shadow on. Because depending on how you layer it, it might end up getting all covered up. But that's something we can go back later and add more shadow to an area if it got covered up. So don't worry too much about that. Just use your best guess. And I'm just going to tap this around again just to kind of give it a more rocky texture. These three colors have been so versatile, which is really fun. I love working with a limited color palette. I was the kind of person that always did the best in a project where I had a prompt that really limited me instead of an assignment where they were like, do whatever you want for this. It was like the world was like too big for that. Like I really liked having a prompt for something. And I think that's something that really made me stick with ArtSnacks when I was first a subscriber, because the box itself is like a prompt where it's kind of like you get to like test the limits, of it using like limited color palette, limited products. And I always found that like the problem solving part was the part I really liked about a project. So, and like using a limited palette is sometimes like problem solving, because you're like, oh, I want to create this value scale, or I need to convey this type of object, but it's not typically, purple or something. And it really kind of like helps you like push out of the norm and really get into that like creative side of it. Yeah, so if you have ever been to like art school or taken an art class before, where like maybe your first couple weeks, it was like really strongly guided, like where you were drawing a still life or drawing something, like they told you to like draw something um, from a plant outside or something. But then like sometimes your like biggest project would be like, draw whatever you want. And I'd always be like, ah. So those I found really challenging. And that's also just like part of an artist story, I think, as well, of like finding what your thing is, what you like to draw. As time goes by, I have like really honed in stuff that I like to draw. These days almost always end up drawing space stuff, like today. Has a little bit of spaciness in it. And space is what keeps me inspired. But yeah, the limited supplies is can really get you outside of, I don't know what to do, but like sometimes for some reason having that like limited, like it really, I think it shortens the decision space for me. And I would sit a long time in like the paralysis of like all of the things I could do if I had unlimited supplies to pick from. All right, so I'm just continuing on these mountain textures, and you can really see like they're coming together. They look good. This is Purple Mountain's Majesty, I think. That's what it reminds me of, at least. Flashbacks to elementary school, learning that song. When I was working on these initially, I ended up with purple like all over my face. And I guess I didn't realize how much I was like adjusting my glasses and stuff as I was working. And I thought I just had it one spot. And when I got upstairs, I ended up having it like everywhere. These pastels will kind of get you like that sometimes. They do come off really easily though. Okay, so that was my last one. And now I'm going to start laying them out on the paper how I want, and then figuring out some type of order of how I want to glue it down. So this is kind of a funny one. It's like a little square, so I might end up just like covering up part of it. Maybe I won't start with that one. Let's start with this one. And then pick this one. Let me see. Looks like I could do that. Yeah, so this is really just like a brute force thing where it's like just try out a bunch of stuff, see what works. That's looking pretty good for that top part. I think I'm just going to go ahead and glue this part down so I don't have to remove so many pieces to start gluing. And I'm going to use the same glue that I was previously, so the liquid glue. Make sure that that's positioned where I want. There we go. These are so hard to pick up sometimes. Okay. Okay. All right, now we're just going to start putting the next section of mountains on there. And again, if it's like hard to see where it's overlapping, that's okay. Like this part, like the value isn't really too different between those two mountains, but we can go back and really bump up the value scale later with our colored pencils. So right now it's really just working out like, is the mountain points, are they like the composition that you want? Can you see enough of the previous layer? But we'll go up and really bump up these like, so it has this like same darker part on it, and you could see each of the tips really well, we'll like bump that up later. So don't have to be as concerned with that part. I think I like right there. I was like, but maybe I should use this one next because I kind of want to be able to cover up this like hard edge. And that looks cool. I think I'm going to put that there. I like that. Okay. All right. And you can see that I left a little piece, maybe it's kind of hard to see, but this isn't completely covering up the mountain behind it. So that's okay, because I can just use another piece like this, like right in front of it. So I think I will use this piece. And this last layer, I know this one was supposed to be pointing up, but maybe I like that. Let's see. That's cool. Okay, let's go with that. Sometimes it's hard to like remember exactly where you had everything. Okay, so I had this one over like right here. Okay. So that section is complete. And dare I say these mountains look even better than these ones. I think those look fantastic. Okay. So I'm just going to move some of this paper out of my way. And I'm going to grab some of the green Fabriano paper. This one is called Moss, I believe. And I did see that Lee dropped the link to the Fabriano paper pads in the ArtSnacks shop if you want to check those out. And I'm going to use my pencil to just quickly sketch out like a zigzag of the how I want the trees to look, because that's our next section here is the trees. And I'm just going to do a quick little section here. You certainly don't have to sketch that out. I just want to make sure, because I'm going to do a couple different ones of these, and I need to make sure that like they vary in size. So sometimes it just helps to have something to go off of. And this one I'm making a much skinnier zigzag. And you'll be able to use both sides of the zigzag to cut out the trees. So it's just what I drew, not much. And then you just cut along your zigzag. It doesn't even have to be that precise, because you can just flip over the paper and use the side without your pencil marking on it. And I'm keeping these connected for the time being, just because that's going to make it a little bit easier to put the pan pastel on. It's going to make that process just like a little bit quicker. So actually, I'll show you two different ways to do this. So you can take these and now put the pan pastel on similar to how we've been doing, or you can take it before you cut. And this might only work for like larger triangles, but you can like brush some on right now. You'll just have to be mindful of how much you cover up your pencil line. And since that's wider than the pencil line, whew, you're going to get a little bit of that on each side. Okay, so now you kind of see it has a green outline on it. And from here, you can just snip these all in separate little trees. So these were my bigger trees, the whiter ones, which maybe I'll use a few of these like up front. That's something I didn't do with this one. I didn't like create like any like visual depth with the back ones being smaller. So that's like an extra step I'm taking this time. And now I'm going to put on some of that green pan pastel onto these pieces and keeping them, not cutting them up in individual ones just kind of makes the step a little bit faster because you're not having to like hold on to each tiny little piece. All right, I'm going to create a second little pile here that has a different size. Cutting these apart.
Hey, Caitlin, it's looking
Woo!
great. Did I just scare you?
You did. I'm so sorry.
Maybe
Spooked
next
me.
time I won't
I
scare you
know.
when you're
No,
using
you're
a
fine.
scissor.
Too funny. Okay, go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
Um, we're about halfway through. I just wanted to give you a time check
Great. Thank
and
you.
not scare you while you're using a
I
scissor.
think like it's probably just because I have the headset on, so it's like I literally can't hear like any like ambient noise while I have this on. And so
So I'm in your
that
head.
was it was like I was just here in my art zone and just had totally gotten into
That's good.
my
That's
my
good. That's good.
masterpiece here.
I think it's looking really good. This is like instead of like found collage, this is like made collage. I think there's a term for it. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not up to date on all my like collage terminology. This reminds me of like I was a big scrapbooker back in the day. And so this reminds me of a lot of like paper craft type card making techniques maybe. Um, which this would certainly be a really cool card. If
Sure, yeah.
if you wanted to make.
There must be a name for it. So there's found collage, which is like you find objects and you assemble them.
Right.
But then there's another, I think it might be assemblage collage, where it's like you make the pieces to make the collage.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. I'm just arranging my little trees. And I'm using the skinnier ones on the first layer, and I'm going to use the thicker ones in front. I think that's how I want. I mean, and maybe I'll use a little bit of a variety, both. Like maybe I'll put like one big one back here. And when I get to like this part, I'm like, okay, I should start gluing down because otherwise I'm gonna put too many pieces on there. So. All right, and this one first. Like I like this technique because it's very like convincing in its depth, because the paper is already going to have that natural shadow for you, that you don't have to be extremely skilled at creating like a visible depth. You have like actual depth there. And so I just, it's a very nice skill, especially if maybe you're a beginner, or if you just want to like create something that doesn't have to have too much detail in it, but you need it to look like it has more in it. And I know that this is a really popular style to do, like digitally now as well, is like creating that like paper cut look. Yeah. And there's very talented artists out there that make this look like cut with like an X-Acto knife and cut all the shapes out very precisely. So this is more of like a very beginner or like entry level part into that. And in the past, when I've made these, sometimes I'll stick the trees into the mountains as well, like put some behind some of the mountains. So if you want to do that, like if you have a bunch left over and maybe you want to try putting that. You also are welcome to skip the trees and just go straight to the water part as well. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, you can do like a river that goes through the mountains. And if you're not really sure how that looks, just look up a photo of an actual river in the mountains, and that can like give you an idea of um, scale and positioning of like how you should have it come through. I've also done a similar technique to this where I used watercolor on all of the pieces and just created like interesting textures and um, like interesting colors on watercolor paper, like creating an abstract design. And then I cut up all of those papers to make something like this. And that was really fun. And it's also one that like, if you have kids, um, you can have them just like draw on paper or watercolor on paper, and you'll end up, more with something like random like this. And then you can cut it up and create it into something like this using their work. So I think that would be a really fun idea. I'm gonna have lots of trees in this section. And I'm actually leaving like a pretty decent amount. Like I'm not pressing these down, so I'm getting like a lot of actual depth there. So you can go with what type of look you want. You can certainly press these down all the way, but I really like how I'm getting, like, especially if you look at the two of these, like this one has so much more visual depth because of the like gapping in the paper, which I think is looking pretty cool. So that is a good example of like comparing what it would look like if you didn't press all of them down. It would look more like this. And if you try this out, I would definitely love to see what you came up with on Mix. I'll be posting my finished pieces, and I will certainly be posting, so it's like, I think we'll have enough time to at least start on the next piece. But I will definitely be posting all of my finished pieces so you can look at those. And maybe if you're looking for like a fun craft to do with your family, if you're celebrating next week's holiday, this would be a fun one that you can tailor to everybody's skill level, because you can really use any type of paper or any type of like, you don't have to use pastel, you can use marker, whatever. So definitely play around with the different types of media to use. Okay, I'm gonna put one more tree here, one more tree here, and then I'm gonna call it a day. And I think I'm gonna extend my paper. Like, I think I'm gonna make the water come up a little bit higher. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what we do. And I just realized I left, like, you can see this piece, and I don't think my water is gonna go up that high. So I'm just gonna add a skinny tree right here. Okay, so there are my trees. And if you wanted to go for, I think, an even more realistic thing, you could do stems, or not stems, trunks on the trees. Before the water, like you would have like a layer of ground. But I guess I'm picturing being at like a much lower perspective point, that like if there was a lake, I'm like even lower down from it, maybe like at the lake level. So I'm not able to see the bottom of those trees. So that's the perspective I'm going for. And I'm going to use some of the blue Fabriano paper to do this one. This one is called C. And I'm just going to start cutting out little wave patterns in this and see what I come up with. You can make ones that are like curvier wave patterns or very very still water. I think I'm gonna leave this one like long because I might use it and then for my top one, and then cut it off where I want later. So for these, in this example, I actually use the purple pan pastel, but this time around, I'm just gonna glue it down how it is. And I'm going to use some of our colored pencils to add the color into it. So that's gonna be my top piece here, except I just wanna cut off this tall piece right there. So I'm just gonna do that. And these ones are gonna overlap quite a bit because I did not leave a lot of like space on the bottom. Okay. And then there we go. So that's looking good so far. And again, it's kind of trial and error. Like if you are putting them up next to each other and you don't think any of them look good, just like try cutting out some more shapes and play around with the scale of your waves. And again, this is a more is more situation. So don't be afraid to like really load up on the layers that you have. Woo! Glad that landed glue side up. Trying to figure out which one I want to use next. I think I'll use this one. And just make sure I use the very top of this. And I know you can't tell the difference between a lot of these yet, but that'll change when we put our colored pencils in. And then this one will be my top piece. And it's also going to, I'm going to trim off the bottom where I want, which will be slightly longer than my base paper. And something is telling me that I should use a straight edge for this, but I don't think I am. I'll just have to live with it if I don't like it. Like I like to eyeball stuff so make this a little shorter. Just looking at it, I'm gonna cut a little bit more off right here. Okay, so that is what the back of it is looking like. So I extended it slightly. And then right now you can go ahead and cut off if you had any pieces that are just like hanging out like that. You can go ahead and just cut them off to the edge of the paper. It's like a few pieces that are pretty long. It's good to overlap even a little bit so that everything's going to have a nice clean edge. You could also alternatively like cover it with a frame of some kind, like a mat board or just another piece of paper that has a rectangle cut out of it. And I'm just cutting off those little edges. All right, so now you can see that looks a lot cleaner. And now I'm going to go in with some colored pencil. And first I'm going to go in like the mountainous region. And I think I'm going to use this gray color. Let me show you. It can get a lot darker than the color that's on the cap, although that is kind of looking similar, but I feel like it's a little bit darker. It looks pretty light gray on the cap. And then you also have this purple, which this looks really, really light purple, like the color on the cap. But it's a pretty dark purple. So either of those I think would be good options for the mountains if you use the same colors that I did. You can also go in with like your fine detail pan pastel brush if you prefer to do that. But right now I'm just going in and I'm darkening up like the very bottom of all the mountains, kind of like these little point parts so that they pop more against the other spots. And you can do this gradually so that you don't end up making a part look like you didn't, like you covered up too much of the texture on the mountain. So can certainly make that gradual. But I would go with the rule that you want to make the under layer darker instead of like darkening up this edge Otherwise, it's going to bring this back one forward a lot. So you always want to be darkening up like the back edge. Going through and changing those up. I might even darken these up just a little bit, as if it's really behind the trees. And I'm using a very light hand for most of this. Just adding a little bit of depth. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And now to make it pop even more, I'm going to take the white colored pencil and lighten up some of the mountain tops. And this can have a big color payoff, especially on the toned paper. So you can start lightly and build it up. Again, this is something like I don't need it to be much lighter since it's already kind of has a lot of dimension to it. This is just adding a little bit more, but especially if you had a mountain that kind of went missing in your composition, it's hard to see now. This using the white on top will really help. These also can like blend with the pan pastels too, which is pretty cool. Right. They're looking a little bit more snowy. I live in Seattle and all of the mountains have snow on them right now, which is really fun. And it was actually a really clear day today, so you could see the mountains. And I think they just got their first like big snowfall just the other week. We don't really get like thunderstorms or anything here, but we get like we'll probably get like a couple rumbles of thunder a year. I know that like other areas of Washington are different, but right in Seattle, the thunderstorms always just kind of miss us. So we don't get them a lot, but we get a lot of wind storms. And so it's usually like it'll rain and then we'll get like a bunch of wind. And the wind was so bad it actually knocked our power out last weekend, which had never happened before living here for 10 years. So that was pretty crazy. But then it's like there was so much wind that there's not any clouds in the sky. It's like the wind like pushed them all away. And so you can see the snow on the mountains really, really good now that it's so clear. But it is the rainy season, so the rain will be back eventually. All right, so that is looking a little bit snowier, a little bit more dimension there. And I'm also going to take the extra step and pop in with my General's pastel chalk pencil and just add a little bit more dimension onto the trees as well. And using this in pairing with your pan pastel is really fun because this has just such a precise tip to it that it's almost like using like a really fine pointed paintbrush when paired with your pan pastels. So Like, I think if I had a choice, I would work, like if I was doing a pastel piece, I would want to work with pan pastels and then the pan pencils and just skip out like the uh chalk pastel sticks. There you go. I think that would be my first choice. And here I'm just going around the edges and deepening those up a little bit. But this is also another opportunity to like add in some more realism if you wanted to. So like you can add in, like make it look more like a pine tree, and add in some textures like that, or you could add in branches. You could add in any type of like fruit, I guess, that the tree would have. Um, maybe not a citrus fruit, but there was like pine cones or something like that. You could make them all festive, snow-covered holiday trees. It would be really fun to pick up a white pan pastel to be able to pop in some white. They're so pigmented that I feel like that would just like a little would go a long way too. Okay, the other color I have for the generals is this blue color. I'm going to use this part on the water. And again, I'm just kind of like starting on the edge of where the waves are and just pulling down, just trying to make a gradient there. Just very slight to begin with, and then you can go and darken up as needed. And for another effect, you can also color like from the bottom up and leaving the top part the lightest instead of the darkest. So yeah, you can pick either one. And just checking the time. Okay. All right, so I added some detail into the water. I'm not going to spend too much time on that right now because I want to get to the sky. And I used the colored pencils to draw my little galaxy scene. You can kind of see they're a little like, and with my light, they kind of are a little shiny. And I use the yellow and pink colored pencils, but you can use pretty much any of them. And all these colored pencils are going to show up really good on the toned paper or like a black paper. So you don't have to worry too much about which colors you pick from there. Like if you want to use red or blue, all of those are going to show up pretty well. And I'm just going to start with a circle and slowly fill it in using small circular motions. I am going to add a slight modeling to it where I'm going to make this part a little bit like a darker or more pigmented yellow. It's actually going to, since the paper is black, it's going to make this side look darker and this side will be lighter. So if you're using the dark paper, remember that your shading is going to be opposite a little bit. So if you shade something heavily, it's going to make it look lighter. because the white of the paper will not be showing through. So that's what that looks like. And then I'm going to do a pink one up here. And similar thing here, just some small circular motions to fill it in. And then I'm going to darken up one side. I should probably be doing this over my scrap paper so that I don't draw on my desk.
Caitlin, it's Lee again. Don't be scared.
I was not scared this time.
You also were not holding a scissor, so that's good.
Yeah.
So we got about 10-15 minutes left.
All right.
And we have a bunch of people with us. Hopefully you guys are enjoying what's happening with Caitlin and her project this evening. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or I'll invite you to maybe share what you're creating. Doesn't have to be what Caitlin has been doing. It could be something that you're working on that's ArtSnacks related. But we would love to see what you guys are making, if you are indeed making it or just having it in the background. So if you want, you can turn your video and audio on, raise your digital hand or your physical hand if you want to come on camera. Or if you have any questions and you just want to turn on your audio, you're welcome to do so. So I guess no one wants to share, which is totally fine. But if that is the case, then Caitlin, I'm going to hand it back to you for
Yeah.
10 more minutes.
I went ahead and added some rings around my planets up there, and then I just used the white colored pencil to do the stars in the background, where I just made a bunch of little dots. And for even more of a punch, you could get out a white gel pen to do the dots. I think the using the like softer toned white colored pencil, I think fits in more with I know you can't see it much where this was sitting, but I think it like fits in more with this composition a little bit better. That maybe like using a different media on top, like the white gel pen, might like be too punchy. But it would certainly show it very well, especially maybe if you were taking this picture to put on social media or something. But I just used the white colored pencil, and I think that looks great. I did want to talk about my other piece here that I did. In case you want to start this piece, I'll just give you a little bit of an intro of how I started this one, so that you could start it yourself. So I did not have, or let me show you the photo reference I was going off of. So this is the photo reference I had picked for this, and it has some like really pinky, purpley clouds up here. And so what I did was I took some scrap white paper and I just colored the whole thing pink. I didn't spend too much time getting it really dark, and I'll have to hold this up so you can see it is pretty pink, even though it's getting a little washed out. But I did that first, and then I took my graphite pencil and I just sketched out loosely the shape of how I wanted these clouds to look. And then I cut that out with scissors, and I put those pieces onto my background first. And then I focused on cutting out some of these hill shapes. and I layered them all up like we did with these ones, except I put the purple on first before I glued it down, kind of like with the mountains, and I put these ones on. And then after they were glued on, I went in with the yellow and put that on the hilltops. And then I just continued to develop all of these different pieces more. So I worked some yellow into the clouds and purple into the clouds, and I used the blue colored pencil to deepen up the background here. So just wanted to give an overview of that piece in case it's something that you wanted to start on. And I'll give you guys some little close-up views of the pieces so you can see all of the texture. And again, these are like abstract or not abstract, like stylized landscapes. So they don't have to look exact. And I think from far away too, it really, like those do look like clouds and stuff, which is really fun. And then I will give you a close-up of these two. So here's the one that has the sky finish, and you can see this starts really well. All of the different layers. And then the one that I worked on tonight, which isn't as glued on, like I left a lot of the paper kind of floating. You can see I used a lot more yellow on that back layer, but you can really see the visual and actual dimension on each section. So yeah, those are the pieces. Again, if anybody has any questions about each piece or any of the materials I used, feel free. I would love to see what you guys are making with your box on Mix. So I think you can tag me on there or something. So feel free to
Yeah,
do
you can
that.
tag. You can tag.
Yeah, so, and then I'll post these ones on there too. So if you think of a question later, just comment on my post and I'd be happy to answer questions about any of the pieces there too. But I can, if we have a little bit of time, I'll go ahead and add in these stars in the background. And if you end up thinking of anything, just pop on in. And just as a reminder, the ArtSnacks holiday sale's going on right now. So don't forget to check that out. There's a lot of good stuff. And Sarah has been highlighting a bunch of items on Instagram too. If you don't know where to start, that's a good spot. Or they also have these like gift guides on their shop too. So lots of good places to look at. And for these stars, I like creating like one bigger dot and then I kind of surround it with a couple small ones just so I know I'm getting a variety of shapes. And I just kind of work my way around until I feel like I have enough. And for the rings, I used a combination of the color of the planet that I had and the white pencil. And I'm going to add a little bit more of blue in here I used the blue chalk pastel pencil before, and now I'm using the blue mechanical colored pencil.
Looks like we got a comment
All
from
right.
Angela. I never think about paper piecing. Thanks for the ideas. This was fun. Need to wait for my glue to dry before I use the pencils. I always over glue.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's really easy to overglue, um, for sure. But yeah, I'm glad you were inspired. Um, and I hope you can take this technique and like expand on it too. Use it. You can definitely use this in so many different ways. Um, even if you just have uh like I've ran into a place where I used way too much media. Um, or I like don't have like let's say you're doing an Art Snacks challenge and you don't have like a white paint pen or something that's going to show up on dark paper, but the substrate that you got in your box is white. Like you can, even if you're just creating like one layer where you need something white on the paper or that highlight, you can cut up a piece of paper and put it on there for that spot. So it can be used very minimally, or you can make an entire composition as well. So I love just using this technique, yeah, in many different ways. It's very, um, like you can build upon it. Very good.
So last call for anyone that wants to share. Totally fine if you don't, but it would be nice. And then my daughter kind of just like came in the office here. So say hi. But if that's it, you can wrap it up and we can
yeah,
stop recording. So I think it looks great.
there we go. We'll just set up the final pieces here. And there we go. All you need to do is add some snow on top of the trees and you can send it as a holiday card.
Oh yeah, for
Perfect.
sure.
There we
Awesome.
go.
Well, thanks everyone for
So
joining us live. I'm going to stop the recording now.